Red Rocks Austin, we are wrapping up 2024 and having a service from home. We hope you are enjoying this today from the comfort of a couch with some family, friends. Maybe your group is together to enjoy this service. We always love at the end of the year to take a weekend where we're not all in the building, but we are together by sharing stories and reflecting back on what happened this past year. 2024 was quite a year.
Yeah.
We had an election. We had the Olympics. You may have forgotten about something that rocked the world, an eclipse.
Ooh.
A lot of things happened this year in the world. And in the midst of a crazy world with so many stories and things happening, so many cool things are happening in this church. And it's important. It's a biblical principle to reflect before you move into a new chapter, to reflect. And so today, right up from the top, so you know what to expect. This is going to be a conversation. We're going to get some of our team in here joining us. We're going to tell stories and celebrate moments of the story of 2024. We kicked this year off with a series called The Story You'll Tell. Yeah. And we were challenged, each of us, to say, hey, at the end of this year, when you look back, what will be the story that you have to tell? What will be the things that God did in your life? And we have a heck of a story to tell, and we're going to love to reflect on a bunch of those moments and set up kind of a moment of commemorating what God has done before we step into the next chapter.
Yeah. And like you said, that's actually a very biblical thing. Don't forget to remember, because when we remember on purpose, it builds our faith for the next chapter or the next season. And that happens all throughout Scripture, but one of maybe the most well-known is in the beginning of the book of Joshua. Everybody knows the story of when Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt through the parted Red Sea and then into the wilderness where there's 40 years of wandering. But when Moses passes away, his predecessor Joshua takes over, and now Joshua is this young guy leading all the Israelites not through the Red Sea, but this time they cross through the Jordan River into the Promised Land. And this is what happens in Joshua 4, starting in verse 1. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe. Tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. And then if you skip ahead a little bit to verse 6, in the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? You can tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And these stones are to be a memorial to people of Israel forever. So this will be a reminder. This will be the story that you tell your kids for generations to come. Look back and remember what the Lord has already done. I believe God has us do that. There's something beautiful about, even seasons and ending one year and going into the next year and taking a time to look back and remembering what God has done as a way of building your faith for what God's about to do next.
And you have to picture that in years to come, a dad would take his kid there to that site and say, here's the story of Joshua and our people and what happened here. And those stones represent a story, which is not all celebration and all the good times. There's hard times, there's trials. And for each of us, we hope that this gets you reflecting on this past year, and not just the high points, but all of the different things that we walked through, ultimately to see the goodness and faithfulness of God, who has carried us through the good, bad, and the ugly. Before we get into church talk and moments that happened here, let's talk personal.
Okay.
We don't live here at this church.
Well, Ryan does. He lives right behind that curtain.
We don't. I'm sorry. We don't live here.
Yeah, we have families.
Ryan does, but Ryan still has.
Oh, Ryan, I'm kidding. That's a joke, man.
We have lives outside of the church. People may not know that.
Yeah.
But there are personal moments to reflect on as well. Not just work related, not just ministry related, but personal moments where God speaks. And those are so important to stand on and remember. And so let's start with sharing a couple personal moments of things that God spoke to you profoundly this year.
Yeah, I had a couple moments traveling with my kids. And so I fly to Denver about once a month to preach at our Red Rocks Denver locations. And I usually bring a travel buddy. And sometimes it'll be Will or it'll be Kinsley. And a few months ago when it was Kinsley, she is the most fun travel buddy. Everything is awesome to her. I showed a clip of her as a sermon illustration in a message a few months ago that so many people have brought up to me, but filming her in our hotel room, because we had 2 queen beds, and I let her pick which bed she wanted, and she did eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by his tail. Oh, I'll let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny,
Which one's yours?
This one.
Okay, which one's Daddy's?
This one.
All right. It was a reminder to me. There's like 10 sermon illustrations in it, first of all. But second, the main one to me is how oftentimes we pray and ask God what we should do next. But for a lot of us, we already know what we've picked.
Yeah.
We're just kind of hoping God signs off on it so he can validate it. And that's why sometimes we'll only hear what we want to hear. Or sometimes we won't hear him because we're only listening for what we want him to say. And if God was saying something different, would you actually hear him? But my kids are like a gold mine of sermon illustrations. Yeah. And then taking Will on my most recent trip, I told him about 3 weeks before the trip, I said, "Hey buddy, do you want to come with Dad to Colorado for my preaching trip?" And the next morning, he came down the stairs with his suitcase packed. And obviously no clothes in it. It was just like some toys and some stuff for the
essentials.
Yeah. Yep. But he was that excited. 3 weeks early, he packed his suitcase. And it's a reminder to me of how God feels about spending time with his kids when we're excited to just be with him, how much him as a father, how much that must do to his heart.
That's so good. I think mine, I went to Hawaii. I go to Hawaii every summer.
Oh, we know.
And our good friend Matt Fons, we took a 3-day kayak trip where his wife Jess dropped us on one side of the North Shore, the Nepali coast. And then we just planned 3 days later, she was going to pick us up over here on the other side. So we had 3 days to make our way around. And the last morning was a Sunday morning. And I think it was the first Sunday morning that I wasn't here, hadn't been here in like over a year or 2 years or whatever. And it was sinking in like as Matt and I were just paddling in the most beautiful place on the planet, like this remote island, the north side of it, where there's nobody. We haven't seen people in forever. And since we give like so much to the church and we just believe in this place so much, it's such an honor to do that, but it can also be overwhelming at times, and it can be hard to see past it. And so I think I just had this cool moment where it was Sunday morning, I'm praying for church, and then out of nowhere this pot of dolphins started swimming by and like jumping everywhere. And this really cool reminder, it was like God was like, "Hey, I've got this and we're good. And there's this big story that I am telling, and you just get to play a part in it. So keep playing it to the best of your ability, but don't hold on so tight to it." And so I think that is what I keep coming back to is moments where you get to exhale and remember just how good God is.
I came home from church after a weekend of preaching, and honestly, this year, a portion of it for me just felt tired. Just exhausted. There was times where I just felt like I don't have much in the tank. And I came home from a weekend and just felt pretty depleted. And I had grabbed some pho, like the soup, on my way home to eat when I got home. Whenever I think I'm going to get sick, I always just get that. And I just believe it works. So I got home and was in the kitchen getting it ready. My younger son, Ray, came in, and he's in the phase as a 1-year-old where he pretty much just any food he sees, he wants it. Yeah. So I gave him a little spoonful, and he loved it, like lit up when he tried it.
That is so funny.
Nice.
Yikes. So we sat down, ended up sitting down on the floor together and ate the entire bowl, which took probably an hour because I had to give him little spoonfuls at a time, but he was loving it and laughing, and we were having so much fun just eating soup together. And for some reason, that kept sticking with me. It was like, what are some of my favorite memories with my kids this year? And that kept coming up. It was like the time I ate soup with my son. But I've reflected on that and felt like God brought it back up to me as a reminder of, hey, you just came off a weekend of doing a whole lot of things for me and ministry, and all that's good and great. But just never forget that all I want are those moments with you.
Yeah, it's good.
That I just want to sit on the floor with you and eat some food and hang out and spend time together. And like you said, our kids are a constant sermon illustration.
Oh yeah, big time.
So many cool personal moments, but let's dive into some church moments. Okay. A moment that stood out for you this year of something happening at church that you'll never forget.
One of the big ones for me was the youth retreat back in February. I got to go speak at it. It's up in Crooked Creek in Colorado, and that room's just so special. And I get there and it's packed out, but I get up to start preaching on Friday, and it's like 30 youth kids from Austin who are like right in the front row. And I have this like proud moment where I'm like so proud of our youth team here and Ethan and his whole team and everything that they're doing. But then also like, this is going to make me sound old, but the next generation of leaders in the church, like even just being back with them before the service and praying with them, I just felt like moving into more of a role of like mentoring them and raising them up, and just feeling like this next generation of leaders at Red Rocks is so strong and so just locked in and grounded in the gospel.
Yeah.
And so I drove away from that just feeling like, man, we truly are just getting started at Red Rocks.
The men's conference night will always stick with me. The men of our church have gotten some call outs from myself and some others. And a lot of guys have stepped up and answered that call. And there was a moment at the men's conference where it was a great night. Guys showed up, we're having food, doing competitions. And then we get into this service, and during worship towards the end, there was a moment where we're singing and the guys on the stage stopped singing into their mics. Yeah. And that's a risk at a men's conference because for a lot of guys, and I've journeyed through this, worship can feel uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
Singing can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially if you sing like me.
Especially if you sing like Ryan.
Oh, Ryan's terrible. Ryan's probably the worst singer I've ever actually heard in my entire life.
And that is part of the story that you told this year. Is some horrible
and that's
singing.
not an exaggeration.
No, it's not.
It's not.
I'm
Nope,
genuinely the worst.
I actually mean that.
But I do it, but I'm bad.
That's how I describe what kind of singer is Ryan. He is the worst.
That is worse. You can't get worse.
He's the worst of singers.
Maybe
the worst
the
of singers.
Yes.
the mom
That could be your
elf,
next book.
maybe she's worse than me.
She is bad.
No,
Yes.
I think I might be worse. Keep going.
You are worse. Worship can be uncomfortable for men.
Right.
But in that moment, they stopped singing into their mics, and you heard all the voices in that room. I got chills hearing the men of our church worshiping passionately and seeing that come out of them in their lives as we have guys stepping up to lead their families and lead groups and mentor. And so I'm just really proud of the men of our church, and that moment encapsulated
It's awesome
for me.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys do this or it's just me, and I also don't know if this is a considered a blessing or a curse of being a preacher, but I kind of gauge the year by the sermon series that we were in.
Oh, yeah.
And all the sermons I wrote, because the sermons I write are just basically what I'm going through and what I need to hear. But anyways, we started this year with a teaching series called The Story You'll Tell. At the end of this year, what will be the story that God tells through your life? And we're all going to tell some kind of story. And I remember my first sermon of this year challenging people that if they want to change, because the end of last year, the most Googled thing on the entire internet was, can I change? People right now are just more desperate than anything else to have something about their life change. And the answer to that question is yes, but you need to be willing to change, and you have to really want it and give God permission to go to that place and actually change that thing in your life. And it's been so cool because in this past week, I've talked to a few people. I talked to one person who they read the entire Bible this year. I talked to a couple that got out of debt this year. I talked to another couple 2 weeks ago who went to rehab and got sober this year. Like, that is the story that God told through their lives this year. And so what is the story that God has told through your life? What will be the story that he tells through your life next year?
It was important to kick the year off, I think, with people recognizing you have a part to play in this, and you have more control of some of the circumstances in your life than maybe you think. Obviously, God is ultimately in control, but like the cliche says, he puts the pen in your hand, and you get to write this story with him. Yeah. Take the reins of your life and set some vision for where God could take you and what could happen in your life in this year. I would love for people just to go to the people watching right now. I'd love for people to throw in a comment. Here's a story that God told through my life this year. We love collecting and hearing those stories and talking to people in the lobby. That set a tone for people to decide a little more than just let life happen to them. We get to witness so many cool moments and stories of what God is doing in and through this church, but we can't keep track of all of them. There's countless amazing stories to be told. And we thought it'd be fun to have some of our team come in here and share some stories that they've seen, stories that they will remember from this year. And so it's going to be a rapid fire Red Rocks staff coming in on this couch. They're going to just be switching in and out, telling stories from this year. And just like that, Chris, you're here.
Whoa!
Came out of nowhere.
Surprise.
Chris, if you don't know, Chris is the guy who makes everything happen. He gets someone from sitting in a seat checking a service out to their next steps in faith, their next steps in community, of plugging into this place. And because of that, you get to witness stories every single week of life change and transformation of what God's doing in individual lives.
Yeah, it's a privilege. And when, we talked about this idea, one story that came to mind was I asked his permission first, but Sean Tooley, this guy, he showed up at our church, sat in the front row, and then afterwards he came to me with these like glaring eyes. And I was like, oh boy, what's this guy going to say? And he was like, so I just finished John and I have some questions, the book of John. And I'm like, okay, what happened in that book? What do I need to explain here? And he said, I loved it. What do I read next? And so this guy was, he was moved by your sermon about dirty laundry from week 1 or 2 of the new year. And he's like, hey, if I'm going to believe this and talk this talk, I want to walk this walk. So he started reading the Bible. He joined a group. He made his way to baptism. And then I had a conversation with him in July, that kind of 7-month mark in his faith where he was really struggling. And we chatted, and he was telling me about all the highs and lows of his faith, but he endured through. He explored more of what can I do next to fight this battle of, is this worth it for me? Is this not? Ended up meeting with Logan Motzinger, our group's pastor, and he said, hey man, I want to lead a new believers group. Because if I did this in 7-8 months, I know there's other guys that I want to walk through this with. Mm-hmm. And he serves on our production team, leads a group, crushing it.
It's a story of discipleship, of someone taking somebody under their wing, getting them to start walking with Jesus and saying yes to Jesus, and quickly them realizing, I want to do this in somebody else's life.
At the beginning of the year, a line was mentioned in the sermon of, hey, give it a year. What's this look like? And I always think now of Sean. He gave it a year and it worked.
The story he has to tell now of what God did because he said yes and gave it that year. One of the things I look back on for this year is the parties that you throw. We have some amazing parties for our team members that serve in so many different capacities on weekends, lead groups. One night we just went rollerblading, which was incredible. Watching a whole room, like 200 adults rollerblading and having the time of their lives. And a value of our staff is fun. We value that, and we want that to be contagious in our church. We're experiencing the joy of Jesus. We should be having fun and enjoying his ministry. So those parties have been amazing to witness. We just had our Christmas party, not that long ago, and we thought it'd be fun to give everybody a little taste if they weren't at that party. We create some special content for that night, and so enjoy the press conference.
All right, please welcome 50% of the band members of the failed band Chasing Rabbits and their buddy, Brandon Lake.
Let's get this over with.
Yeah.
Ryan, congrats on your first book. I think it's a genius idea to write a book for singles in a church that's just filled and overflowing with singles.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Would you say you normally find joy in other people's suffering and loneliness?
Kind of feel like you took a negative spin on me trying to see
No,
what
I
people
think
on
it's
there.
genius to make money off of that.
Doug had mentioned that he is expecting miracles next year. Do you think he was referring to his golf league or Ryan getting married?
Seems to be a focus of all these questions.
If I can share Ryan's phone number with everyone.
After your amazing first book, what do you think the name of the movie will be after your life?
The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Yes. The political lady.
Speaking of golf game, what is your handicap?
8. No, it's not. I'll play golf against you any day. You got to carry your own bag. Think you can do it? He's the worst golfer I've ever seen. He's not an 8 handicap. There's no way he's an 8 handicap. When I played golf with him, I said, wow, he's a terrible golfer. Where am I?
The Afterthoughts podcast, projected to reach 1 million subscribers in 2025. What guests can we look forward to in the new year?
Our Valentine's Day episode is going to be a breakup episode of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Mark Zuckerberg. Did Bob Saget die? John Johnson, Kinsley.
It was rumored that there would be sponsorship from AG1. What is the status? We're all dying to know.
They are dying to get back to us.
Do you guys think that the name Afterthoughts is just foreshadowing for where this church will be in 10 years? Since this will be seen at the volunteer party where we team member party where we're honoring our team members who are also very, very important. Can any of you name one Red Rocks Kids volunteer that has signed up in the last year?
I can't name any Red Rocks Kids volunteers because there are no Red Rocks Kids volunteers. There are only Red Rocks Kids team members
right.
because you are not just a mere volunteer. You are a member of this team.
Good.
team.
Now name one.
If you three had to pick one team to serve on, just one, which would it be and why?
Teaching team.
Okay.
I'd serve on the pastoral team.
No, I don't think you're
afterthoughts
understanding
team.
my question.
Is the reason why you didn't say Lane Murray because you're scared?
Doug, your kid's pastor recently injured his ankle in an incident a few weekends ago. Care to respond to the rumors that you shoved him down a flight of stairs?
Oh, man. I thought about it. But in the end, it was God who did that.
What is your response to the rumors that you guys will actually preach for 35 minutes?
Don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Which one of you made the baptism water yellow this year?
464 baptisms this year, and everyone's complaining about the color of the water. Pee is sterile, though. I learned that, so I don't feel bad about peeing in there.
We're all wondering, how much did you have to pay Emily to marry Chris Robe?
Emily is now making 5 figures as payment for marrying Chris. I would never tell Chris this to his face, but he's an incredible leader, pastor, husband, friend, takes care of all of us. Everybody in this room cares so much about our team members and does things like this, and we're all so grateful for him. Thanks, everybody. This, as always, has been hurtful.
As always, very thought-provoking questions.
Emily Robe, formerly Emily Franklin,
Yes.
got married this year.
I did.
By the way, congratulations. I don't think any of us told you that.
Congratulations to you for getting us married.
Well, it really is the highest honor.
And congratulations to me and Ryan, who were groomsmen.
We were there. Jobby.
Great job, all of us, man. Especially us three.
Yeah, that's right.
And congrats on your new last name.
Thank you so much.
So, Em, you've been our worship leader since year one of this church, and we've seen it grow. We've seen more services being added. We've also seen more depth in our church as people know God more through worship and really kind of learning what worship is. And you as a worship leader, it's not just them watching you worship and trying to follow along. You do such a good job, even in between songs, of explaining, hey, when we raise our hands, this is what it means. Can I tell you a little bit more about worship to equip you to do it yourself, not just right now, but throughout the week as well? Will you talk a little bit about, well, let me ask you this. Yeah. Over 5 services, and because I know it's the same songs 5 times, but it feels fresh every single service. How does that happen?
I think there was actually a moment, I know that obviously week in and week out, but there was a moment during one of your sermons towards the end of the year, I think it was October, Uncommon God, our Uncommon series, where out of the sermon, I think we did Even Though I Walk by Bethel. And then after that, we really didn't choose a song. We just let there be space, which was both like exciting and scary for me because being a church with lots of services, like time's a huge thing. So I feel like we have been very structured, which again is not always a bad thing because we have a lot of people wanting to come in our doors and we want to make space for them. But for that service, that was like a muscle I hadn't exercised in a while. And it was the first time in a while that I think each service actually felt different to me because we allowed that space to be there. And I think it's evident that there's different things happening in the room. And I tell my team all the time, like the band, that when they show up, whatever they're walking through, whatever they're going through, the only way it hurts people is if they don't use that as offering, because worship at the end of the day is offering. And I think what we got to feel in that moment and why that was one of my favorites, which ties back into your question, was there's always something different happening in the room because people walking in are carrying something different. And I think, therefore, their offering is different. And that was a cool opportunity to be like, okay, what does the room need? Because God's the same. Like, the truths about him are the same. But what we're offering to him in worship is different. So, therefore, I think when I can realize, okay, if we see 2,000 people on a weekend, all of them are walking through different things. And I think baptism testimony videos always convict me.
Yeah.
Because you see the people walk in, especially at 8:30, and you're like, clap. And they're like, absolutely not. But then 3 months later, they're on a baptism video saying, I walked in, didn't want to be there, was mad. And by the end of it, like when worship started or, so yeah, I think that, but that was a moment specifically I felt that because we left the space. And then that's not like, now let's recreate every week, right? We have to leave space.
Right.
I think it's me learning that each week can feel different, even if that some weeks it's structured, some weeks it's not, because worship is ultimately about what's happening in the room. What are we offering today? And I'm not worshiping like the method. I'm worshiping God.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we honor God by preparing.
Yeah.
And we honor God by holding it loosely
Yeah.
so that he can do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
I know that feeling of, let's say it's the 10:15 and I'm preaching and it's the fourth time I'm preaching this message. And I have realized I know how to say this point in the best way.
Yeah.
I found it last service.
Yeah.
So I don't need to reinvent it for this one, but it still needs to be authentic because this room is full of brand new people with new stories than the last service. And so something unique also needs to take place.
Yeah.
I've watched worship this year has felt like everyone walks in here with some sort of a shell. Some people's shell around them is a little thicker than others because of their past. And worship's like this gentle little hammer, though maybe not as gentle here because it's loud, but this gentle little hammer that chips away and starts to crack that shell. I've had people come up to me and say, I can't tell you why. I haven't been to church in a long time, but the second I walked into worship, I just lost it. I couldn't control. It's like God was just pulling this out of me, something that I haven't been able to articulate or feel. And the value that you place on and your team places on being a place where that shell can get cracked and people can experience God in a way that only worship does is so powerful. I watched that value that you have for that. We had Corey, our friend Corey Miller, come down and lead a night of worship with songs that he wrote that are all just an offering to God. And it was such a powerful night. And while that was going on, you were running the lyrics, running the slides, the person who's normally on that stage. And to me, that just spoke to the heart of worship of this church, that you don't care where you are in the room, as long as you are helping facilitate people have that experience with God. And I know it was a powerful night for this church and for people and for Corey himself. And because Corey loves Red Rocks Austin, he wanted to say hey to everybody.
Austin campus wrapped. Hey, one of my top 5 memories of this year was getting to come down and do the worship night with you guys. I loved every second of that. There are 2 memories that I think are just branded in my brain and will never leave. The first is when we were singing Sound Mind and we got to that part of the song that says receive joy. And I just remember like the room just exploding, and it felt like the presence of the Lord just like came and just rocked everyone at the same time. Myself, my team, the whole room, everybody was just like, yeah, pour it out. It was awesome. I'll never forget that. The second memory is the same night, there was someone on my team that came just to pray with people and encourage people and just be there in the room as someone that can just cover and ask the Lord what he's doing. And his name's Tanner. And Tanner got into this conversation somewhere in the worship night where someone just got like fully delivered of depression and anxiety. And that's just a big prayer of mine, that when anybody worships with me or listens to my record, that they would just experience the presence in a way that actually lifts something off of them. And so that happened that night. And that's just the answer to prayer. To this day, from everything I can see on streaming or whatever, Austin City is still like the #1 city that listens to my music. And so that means that you guys are listening and worshiping with me. And that means the world to me. I have a lot of love. Happy end of 2024. Merry beginning of 2025.
A really special moment this year was being on stage, welcoming everyone to church. And I looked over and there was an ASL interpreter with a guy sitting there who's getting the service translated into American Sign Language. And seeing that moment was so powerful, to see our church reaching populations that we haven't been able to reach before. And our special needs ministry that we launched has grown. And my beautiful wife, who's here, has spearheaded that. And we have heard stories of families and individuals who have finally found a church home that is serving them. You've gotten to get a front row seat to that.
Yeah, it's been really cool. We have several families that have, like you said, been able to come and make this their church home. Families that beforehand haven't had that opportunity because their children and their specific needs might not have a space where they can comfortably come for an hour a week. So that's been really, really exciting. And on the flip side of that, one of the most exciting things I think we've seen is that the shift in the culture, or at least maybe the awareness just of the people attending this church. We have 37 buddies right now,
Yes.
volunteers
Come on.
who have jumped
Mhm.
in and eagerly serve these families and these kids each week. We had over 300 people volunteer within the last month or two for Night to Shine, which is coming up. And that was not us begging or pleading people to get involved and to love this population of people. That's people that are just jumping up and saying, we see ourselves as lacking as a church if we don't have this population here and represented. And so I think one of the coolest parts of this ministry growing and being established has been just watching the people that attend this church not just accept it, but jump fully on board saying, hey, what can we do? We love this population of people and we want to see them here. So it's been really inspiring.
Awesome. Because people with special needs are an amazing part of the body of Christ. So it's not just about including them or making a way for them to come to church to be part of a community, but because they actually make our church so much better.
Totally.
And teach us so many things.
Yeah, there's just been this sense of community that's been able to be formed. We got to take an entire group of our volunteer buddies and families with their kiddos with special needs to a Texas Stars hockey game recently.
Yes.
And it was one of the highlights of my whole year. Not only did the buddies get to have a great time, getting to know each other and kind of bonding as a team, but these families got to sit down and interact and make friends with other parents. And then the most special thing was watching these kids go and get to experience the game complete with a sensory room available in the stadium for them, because one of our buddies works for the Texas Stars and they were able as an organization to set aside a room that was sensory friendly. So the kids were taken care of. They had a blast, but then the families got to have a fun night out and then the buddies got to join in on that. So it's been a really awesome experience.
So cool. I think part of the story we told this year was a church seeking and sacrificing and doing whatever it takes to get deeper into the heart of Jesus, which is to have all of his kids in his house with him. And our special needs ministry is teaching all of us and growing that in each of us. It's been amazing to watch. And there's a whole bigger chapter to come for so many more families that are going to find a home in this church and Night to Shine and all the things we have to be excited about. The true VIPs of Red Rocks Austin are the ladies at the Lane Murray unit. We have a campus in a prison, and we have a team that goes up every single Saturday. They have church there, and it has been an incredible, incredible journey with the team there, with the team that goes up there, the people there, the ladies that come to service. And Mackenzie, who runs that campus for us and oversees all of it, you get fed all kinds of cool stories and things that happen. It's not easy ministry. You guys walked through a whole lot, but what have been some of the highlights? What's the story that's been told at the Lane Murray unit this year?
Man, there's a lot of different stories that we could talk about. I mean, we had a worship night, which was so fun. We got to do a drive for them. We sponsor all of their graduations, but I think a really cool story that gets to explain a lot about what's happening inside the prison is actually an experience that we had outside of the prison. On Saturdays when we go, we usually show up like 1:15, 1:30. And there was one day where a family member was coming out and we were going in, and she stopped us and she said, "Thank you guys for doing what you're doing. This is really, really cool." She says, "My daughter attends your church. And I used to come on Saturdays at 2:00, but she would miss church to see me. And so she asked me if I could come at a different time so that she could go to church."
Wow.
And it's just like a really cool story of not only she's prioritizing church, but she also is ministering to her family who now is exposed to Jesus and God and all the whole thing. And so, we always get to see her. I actually just saw her a couple weeks ago and we got to say hi and, hey, watch you online and all that fun stuff. And so it's really, really cool to see the ripple effect that God is moving so much inside of Lane Murray that it's affecting their families. And we even have like a prayer request. We take all of the cards and we digitize them. And so we get to pray over all of the prayer requests. And there's so many cool stories of restoration. of families, of people. Last time I was there, someone said, my son hasn't talked to me in 15 years, and I've been praying and praying and praying. And this past week, he wrote me a letter.
Wow.
And I think it's because what's happening in there is so evident that it's expanding outward, which is
Reaching
really
family members, reaching the guards and the people that are at the prison.
We've had multiple guards accept Christ this year. And guards that people warned me about of like, oh, they're so mean and blah, 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 or officers, excuse me. And it's like, oh no, one, they're just doing their job, but two, actually, now that we've developed a relationship, they have watched the sermons. They watch online when they're not even there. And it's been really cool to see just the heart change that's happening in the prison. So it's been really
It's
cool.
crazy when we say go change the world. You'd think, well, at the Lane Murray unit, you can't really change the world, but I guess you kind of can. Like you're changing the world within the correctional facility. And like you said, it's now having ripple effects to even outside and beyond those walls. They are changing the world.
Absolutely.
Wow.
One of my favorite moments this whole year was you gave me a thank you note from one of the ladies at the Lane Murray unit who had received a hygiene pack from our church with shampoo and soap and some needed things that we all take for granted, and getting to read that to our church. It says, "Dear Red Rocks Church, saying thank you for the gift bag of hygienes doesn't describe what it meant to me. When I got to my bunk and I pulled out the hygienes, I was truly caught off guard. I sat there staring at the products, wondering, did this person who chose these products place themselves in here with us? Did this person wonder what it's like to be in this place alone like me? Did this person know that this brand wasn't going to strip and dry my hair out? That this toothpaste will last for a long while? Did they choose this soap because it wouldn't dry my skin or change my pH balance? No wonder everybody is in a tizzy about these hygiene packs. I sat in my bunk amazed and at a loss. It felt like whoever chose these products picked carefully, not just randomly, but with care and concern, that they chose these hygienes as if they were putting party bags together for their family, for their friends or their neighbor, and that expense wasn't an issue. So you see, thank you didn't just seem enough because your bag of hygienes was more than a gift to me. It was a blessing. It's been a long time since I felt seen, cared for. Thank you. May the Lord God bless you, protect you, and prosper this church family. I'll see you at the chapel." Unless you're on the team, you don't really see, but you hear about. But the letters we get and the stories we get to hear about of what God is doing within a prison are incredible.
It's my favorite sermon of the year, preaching at the worship night live. There's something about that audience. They're just they're there. They're with you. It's awesome.
Not a better place to preach.
You feel like a good preacher when you go there.
Yeah, it's the only time.
They laugh, they pay attention. They're in it.
Yeah.
Red Rocks Austin, what's happening? Hey, my name is Sean Johnson. I'm the senior pastor of Red Rocks Church, in case I haven't gotten to meet you yet. As we end this year talking about the story we have gotten to tell as a church, I wanted to share a cool story with you. I was at a church event last week, and a guy came up to me just in tears. And in this event, we were sort of talking about things that the church was able to do all year long. And someone had just recently shared that there was a particular organization here in Denver that helps at-risk children. One of the things we got to do as a church during Love Our City is help this organization who helps these kids, but they needed a fence built around their place so they could better protect the kids, right? So we're talking about that. So this guy comes up to me in tears and he says, you may not remember me, but we met at Colorado Territorial Correctional Facility, one of our Red Rocks correctional campuses. And he said, I got saved at the Red Rocks church services in the prison. And he said, I started tithing on my $15 in prison. And he said, now I'm out and I go to Red Rocks every week. And I love giving because I love being a part of helping hurting people and reaching lost people. And he said, in fact, the story you just heard about the fence that got put around that organization that helps kids, he's like, that's my company. We got to do that. And so I met this guy that's just full circle life change from being in prison to getting saved to out of prison to now being a part of helping hurting people and reaching lost people. And I just thought, man, that is who we want to be as a church right there. That's the story. And for all of you watching, that's just one of the 8,000 salvations that we are celebrating that has happened at Red Rocks Church at all our locations, including Denver, and for you guys in Austin. I just want to say thank you because for all of you who serve and give and show up and invite and everything you do, this doesn't happen without you. And so I just want to say thank you from all of the Denver locations to you guys. We love you so much. I can't wait to be with you again. I hope you had a great Christmas, and I'll see you soon.
One of the things that happened was Ryan releasing a book called...
They already know because it came out in April. Single Today. One of my favorite moments of this year was watching Ryan launch a book that really is so much part of his ministry and getting to share a message that is so needed.
Why am I still single?
Is there something wrong with
Am
you?
I running out of time?
What do I say to my family?
People judging me?
All
What
the
about
time.
kids?
Am I missing out? Is there something wrong with you?
Singleness is a heavy topic. It carries shame, pain, and questions. So many questions that often go unanswered or worse, unaddressed. Trust me, I get it. I've been a single pastor for over a decade. I've heard all the questions, and in the early years, I had no idea how to respond. Like, you know that backhanded compliment, how are you still single? I used to hate that question, but I don't anymore. And being the third wheel used to drive me crazy, but now I love it. Because everything changed the day I noticed a pattern. All the insecurities about singleness fit into two categories, what I call the two enemies of singleness, yesterday and tomorrow. Regret from the past, fear about the future. The past paralyzes us while the future frightens us. Meanwhile, Jesus, who was single by the way, said things like, don't worry about tomorrow, as he called us to live on purpose today. This book is about taking Jesus up on that offer. You really can thrive while being single, but only if you're willing to put in the work. It's time to conquer yesterday's regrets, ditch tomorrow's worries, and embrace being single today.
You know, we have a ton of singles in our church. There's a ton of singles out in the world that need that book, that need that story, and getting to watch you preach it and then hear stories of people who have been impacted by it. I talked to somebody who said, I read that book so fast and it spoke to something that no one had ever spoken to in a way that no one could ever articulate it before. I read that. It was so powerful. And actually one of the cool byproducts of that is I've also had people say, that got me into a healthy place and now I'm in a healthy relationship for the first time.
Awesome.
And so a huge celebration for this year. Ryan is like the least self-promoting person ever.
Yep.
And we have tried our best to get people the awareness of that book, get people reading it, listening to his podcast.
He's like one of the greatest writers and one of the worst sellers.
It's true, man.
So
Yes,
hopefully
it's true.
But it is a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
Yeah. How does it feel to have released your very first book?
I'm so proud of it, man. It's more just that I sat in coffee shops for 4 years, working it and reworking it and changing things and moving things around. And so to have a finished product that is very much my story, it's just fun, man. I just feel like for years in the church, we never talked about singleness. It was always like we talk about dating, but we've never honored the sacred subject of singleness. And now I'm starting to see that happen all around the world. And I'm really, really proud of that.
The lesson of contentment in that book is for any place of relationship. That's what I have felt challenged by when your messages from this year, reading the book, is finding a place of contentment with what you've been given and where you are at today, and not always thinking of what's next or what could be better all the time. There's a place for that, but in our culture is kind of the mentality constantly that exhausts you. And that message of contentment has been so needed for our church and for me personally.
Thanks, man.
All right, I got a question for you guys.
Oh boy.
Call me Questions with Kayla from the Afterthoughts podcast, TM. Or more of a Bible trivia question. Because after relationships, biblical strategies, we moved into a series that was 7 weeks long called I Am.
Yep.
And basically the gist of it, one thing we say a lot here is we exist to make heaven more crowded by helping people to know God, live on purpose, and then together we go change the world. That all starts with knowing God. We have a God who actually wants to be known by you and wants a relationship with you. And so who is God can actually be the same question as, well, who is Jesus? Because I think it's Colossians and Hebrews both say something about Jesus being the image of the invisible God. In other words, if you want to know what God is like, just read the 4 Gospels and look at Jesus. Better yet, let Jesus answer the question. Jesus, what are you like? Tell us what God is like. And he made 7 I am statements in the book of John. What are they in order?
Wow. Well, I know them, so I'll let Ryan go to see if he knows them.
Obviously.
Okay. I am the light of the world. Or is that second?
That's number 2.
I already missed.
I am the door.
That's number 3.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I thought we already had number 1.
Oh, yeah.
Cut. Let's start this back over.
Nope.
Number 1. Doug preached
Do
the
not
first
cut
week.
that.
Doug preached the first week.
Yeah.
Okay.
The word?
I know it.
Obviously, you guys, it was a standout sermon.
I can't top this
Changed
thing.
my life, Doug.
Yeah.
I am the bread of life.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. And then I am the light of the world.
I am the door.
Yep.
I am the good shepherd.
Correct.
I am the resurrection and the life.
Yep.
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yep.
And I am the vine.
Vine. Yep.
Thanks for letting me say it.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to say it.
Yeah. That was really unselfish. You kept letting me pass the ball back to me.
I'm the assist guy.
Yeah.
I love that series.
John Stockton. That was probably my favorite series of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Right in the middle of it, we did Easter. I am the resurrection and the life.
Right.
Easter this year was awesome.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I feel like this was our 6th Easter.
We had
Since we
people
started
parking
this
at
church.
Academy
Yes,
Sports next door.
right.
By the way, if you
Golf
own
carting
Academy
them over.
Sports,
It was
thank
agreed
you.
upon.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was all above board.
Yep. And we owe you
Golf
a
carting
fruit
people
basket.
over to the church. I love that was right smack dab in the middle of that series because Austin is the perfect example of a city where so many people are asking, what is truth?
Yes.
And when they show up to a church that's in the middle of a conversation about who truth is,
Mm-hmm.
it just pulled so many people right in to such a compelling story of Jesus with raising Lazarus from the dead. But for me, I felt like that series gave us such a clear opportunity to tell people this is who Jesus is and this is who he's not, because the world has all kinds of false narratives about him. And to look at that story of the resurrection and the life, Jesus doesn't go up to Martha and say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't raise your brother. I'm an idea.
Yeah.
I'm just a consciousness. I'm just a construct that some people made up.
Mm-hmm.
He walks up to her as God in the flesh and tells her, I am the resurrection and the life, and raises her brother from the dead. And we watched that happen to people in our church, going from death to life, being raised like Lazarus to new life in Jesus. So let me be very clear with you. Jesus is not an ingredient. He is the drink. Jesus is not a consciousness. He is the Christ. He was not merely a man. He is the Messiah. Not merely a prophet. He is the Prince of Peace who has come to make peace between you and his Father. He was not just an idea. He is Emmanuel, God with us. Not just a concept. He is the King of Kings. He's not an app. He's the iOS. He was not just a good guy. He is God in the flesh. Not just another insurance policy to throw on. He is your only way, the way to the abundant eternal life that you want. He is the Alpha and he is the Omega, the beginning and the end. He is the author and finisher of your faith. He is your atonement. He is the Lamb who was slain for your sin. He is your salvation, not a supplement. He is your salvation. He is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. That is who Jesus is.
And I love that sermon. I remember one of the things you said at the start of this year. You mentioned the word clarity. Clarity on who Jesus is, clarity on the gospel, and presenting to our church with so much clarity, as much as we possibly can. This is exactly who Jesus is. And by the way, this is also who he's not. And saying, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not a way, not a truth, not a life, but the truth, the one and only way to the one and only God, and trying to just be as clear as possible and making that bold.
The article is always important.
It is.
It's not a way, it's the way.
Yeah.
Some people, that sounds so crazy to hear someone make that bold of a truth claim in a culture of relative truth. And that's what I really loved about that series. And some of it was people upset. But when the feedback you get, and you got bashed for a sermon so clearly saying Jesus was the only way, he was the door, right? I think the highest compliment you can get as a preacher is when someone says he was so bluntly true about Jesus being the only way.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. the beauty of the I am statements of Jesus are so clear and blunt, and they force a decision out of you. But what I've seen that do in so many people's lives out of that series and conversations that came from it was freedom. Was the freedom of going, I'm not confused anymore. Now, I'm not taking in 100 relative truths every day and trying to make sense of it all, but now I have a clear Savior who has made his claim and proven his claim to be who he said he was, and I don't need anything else.
Right.
And watching that in the age of spirituality, which led us into the Unseen and Eternal series to talk about the spiritual dimension that's here.
Right.
Many of us are not aware of it, but that is here, was so perfect. We didn't necessarily even think of it or plan it to go that way. But it started to answer the question of the clarity of truth for people and then force them into the conversations of all the other narratives surrounding them and what the spiritual reality is of what we're sitting in.
Yeah, and that series kind of came about because we're just trying to answer the questions people in our church are asking. And so many of the questions I get in the lobby is just, can you talk about this new age spiritual thing? Or can you talk about, astrology or like whatever it is, fill in the blank.
Yeah, or the darkness I feel in my own home.
Just because something is spiritual doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
And I remember the story of Pharaoh and his two magicians. I think their names were Jannes and Jambres. When Moses was kind of, they were kind of a little bit of like a back and forth competition.
Trying to match the plagues.
Yeah,
It's
basically.
like a rap battle for spirituality.
Yeah, it was. And those two magicians, they turn a basin of water into blood and they turn a stick into a snake. And have you ever thought about the fact that it actually worked?
Right.
Just because something spiritual happens doesn't mean it's God doing it.
Yeah.
And so let's have a real conversation about. We wanted to call it supernaturology at first, but we ended up calling it unseen and eternal, and even to get real about spiritual warfare, because we had just had the first baptism weekend of the year right before we started that series, and the questions from people about why does it feel like there's now all of a sudden resistance? I just got baptized 2 weeks ago. Why does it feel like there's now a target on my back? Why is following Jesus more challenging now, and so to just make people feel less crazy. You're not crazy. There is a very real reality of spiritual warfare.
I think a lot of that came full circle for me when we decided to just go through Colossians verse by verse.
Yeah.
4 chapters, 4 weeks. Let's just get right back to it. And for me, the piece that stood out the most is in Colossians chapter 2. Paul says that Jesus is the fullness, is all the fullness that we're looking for. And the Greek word that he uses is pleroma. And back then, the Gnostics, who would be like the New Age spirituality folks of the day, use that word pleroma to talk about how God is somewhere out there, and how we have to, through our actions and through knowing codes and knowing how to talk to angels and all of these practices, how we can actually ascend to be eventually like God. And then Paul comes in just drops this bomb where he goes, actually, all the fullness that you're trying to ascend to, descended to be with us. So Jesus actually is everything that we're looking for. And I remember preaching that on stage thinking, this is what we have been trying to communicate all year. In one verse, Paul got to it first. And that seems to be usually how it goes. All the fullness that we're searching for in the city is found in Jesus.
And shout out to you guys for that series. I wasn't there because Mila was born. So I stepped away for a month.
Oh, you just took a vacation?
Yeah, just a vacation.
Doug was on vacation, paternity leave or vacation as we
it must be nice to be me.
But I remember the day we had another idea for a series that we were going to do called Read, Pray, Love.
That's right.
Which is also funny. And we may do that in the future.
Yes.
Read, Pray, Love.
You heard it here first.
But our
it
whole
was
thing
going to be like a verse a day, a prayer a day, and then one action step a day. It's actually a brilliant idea.
We'll put that on the docket for a future series. But we were sitting in my office and we were talking and we were like, man, we just had the spring was so powerful with I am and just making it so clear for people of who Jesus is, which forces a confrontation in their life.
Yeah.
And then we walked into Unseen and Eternal and had some of that spiritual confrontation happening of people going, okay, Jesus actually is not attached to a bunch of these other things. I've got to decide who I'm going to follow and who I'm going to listen to. And our whole thing was, now let's just meet him with the word.
Yeah.
Just get him in the word, every single verse of this beautiful letter, Colossians, for 4 weeks. And I love the clarity that came out of that series, that comes out of the word of God, to call out things like the new age spirituality of the day. You find out there's nothing new under the sun.
No.
And that people have been asking these questions and trying to make their way in all these things.
Dude, humans have been trying to be like God since the Garden of Eden. It's the original lie the serpent got us with. And so there's actually nothing new about New Age spirituality.
And Colossians, what's cool about it, that like people read that letter with us and realized, for one thing, wow, the Bible, though I've always looked at it as archaic and old, speaks to my moment that I'm in right now, because people are still asking the same questions they were asking 2,000 years ago. And the Bible gives such clarity on this is who Christ is, and this is the superiority of Christ, the magnitude of Christ. And you can say goodbye to all of these facades and all of these counterfeits and walk in step with Jesus. And I watched a lot of people get into the Word, and it planted a seed that started to sprout out of them.
And one thing that you and me bonded over was when I say bonded over, like we hated each other up until this point. Like we haven't been
you're not so bad after all. I agree.
Oh, bygones be bygones. You know what I mean? It's wow. One thing that you and I both agreed was maybe our favorite thing we ever heard Ryan say.
Ryan's preaching moment of the year.
Ryan
gave such clarity to the truth about some questions that people are asking.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
David looked up in the night sky and said, "How amazing is God?" We look up in the night sky and we go, "I wonder if I'm compatible with someone who was born in October." David's going, "God hung the constellations in the night sky. How amazing is God?" And Psalm 8, how amazing is it that he's also mindful of me, that he loves me, that he cares about me. I was born on February 22nd, so it's 222. Multiple times, I've had somebody come up to me and go, "Oh, 222, powerful." With all due respect, and I mean respect, no, it's not. It's when I was born. Here's why this gets me. Do you know what is powerful? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139 tells me that. Hey, stop cheapening the work of my Creator with your hollow philosophies built on human tradition. The good news is so much. You are made in the image of God. God has a plan for your life. God has a purpose for your life. That is truth. That will lead to a firm foundation. That will allow you to walk out your front door and not be tossed to and fro by what some horoscope says about you. The good news in Scripture is so much better than that.
What's up, Red Rocks Austin? It's James here. And I know that I don't live in Austin, but I figure amongst the Austin pastors, Ethan, Ryan, and Doug, that I have to be your favorite of those three. Miss you guys. Love every chance we get to come down there and hang out with you guys. It's not just because of Velvet Taco, but that's definitely a bonus every chance we get. I want to say a couple of shout outs. Shout out to Brian and Cassidy. Shout out to the Dodd brothers. Shout out to my guy, Nehemiah. We love y'all. One of my favorite things about coming down to Red Rocks Austin is every single time we're there is my perspective shifts. Every time I'm with you guys, seeing what's happening in that community, in that room, in the overflow above, there's something that's contagious about the spirituality that's taking place. It's a room full of imperfect people who are doing what we say every week, pursuing a perfect God. There's a hunger and a passion. I think back to several months ago on a visit to Red Rocks Austin when one of the Dodd brothers helped me get a pair of boots. I had a pivotal decision between Tacovas and Freebirds, and he helped me make that decision. And as I was thinking about coming to the end of the year and to Wrapped, I was reminded what that did for me. Those boots were new territory for me. It was a new experience for me, and he guided me on that journey. The thing I love about Red Rocks Austin is people come in every single week, new to faith, new to church, but there's a community waiting, longing to help guide people into this new path. Those boots help me walk a little taller, feel a little bit more confident. But what you're doing every week is you're giving people a higher perspective of God's love, His grace, and His mercy for their lives. You're not just changing a corner of Austin, you're changing a city. You're not just changing a city, you're changing a state. And I believe together, we really are living out our mission. We're changing the world. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.
We get to experience the beauty of watching the next generation of our church being raised up firsthand with our own kids that we check into Red Rocks Kids every year. And we are watching every week a team come together and put their hands in the middle and say, building kingdom builders on 3. And kingdom builders are getting built from babies that are being held through elementary school in our Red Rocks Kids ministry. Eric's here, our amazing kids pastor, who gets to hear stories of the seeds being planted, of families being transformed because of the faith of their kids. So many cool stories that are happening in Red Rocks Kids.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it with just the amazing stories of seeds being planted, but I think one of my favorite things that happens in that ministry is when the kiddo leads and the child is the one that pushes the family when the family, the mom, the dad, whichever it is not bought in yet and not on fire yet. And you get to see that childlike innocence bring the family to church and make a routine of it and make it consistent enough to where God starts to do things in mom or dad's heart.
Yeah.
And those seeds are planted upside down from what you would believe.
Right.
The parent brings the child and all of a sudden the kiddo's starting to learn about Jesus. But when it happens the other way around, because of that amazing group of volunteers and that team that we have, and you see parent come into church week after week and their smile grows a little bit every time they walk in and they're lighter and there's a different kind of perspective from them on what we do here, and all of a sudden they're totally bought in and they're there every week, and
that's awesome.
It's amazing. And sometimes they will tell me, because of what you guys are doing here, we showed up and then we showed up again. And now it's the best part of our week.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many stories in the lobby I've had of parents who come up to me and say, do you have any idea how much better the weekend is, or even how much easier it is to get the family to church when your kids actually want to be in church?
Yeah.
And that's, I never had that as a kid. I remember Sundays, like, I don't want to go to church. Why would I sit in a classroom all week? And so to see kids actually, my kids personally, excited about coming to church changes the game if you're a parent.
Totally.
Yeah, man, it's awesome.
Donuts help.
They do.
And also, there's a small part of me that smiles inside when a kid has a really hard time leaving. It's like, yes.
That's awesome.
Great. Come back next week. We're doing it again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Super cool. I think one of the most impactful baptism moments for me was we had somebody get baptized, and in her testimony video, she was talking about her niece. And it was her niece challenging her, saying, hey, when's your time? And then cut to, and we're baptizing her, and the niece was right there in front of the baptismal.
Yeah.
And so to your point, it's like we see the younger generation starting to lead the older generation. And it's just so beautiful.
And she showed up and within a month started asking to go to church. So I found a church and took her, that 5-year-old girl that saved my life in 2020, got baptized in May. And she asked me, why not me? And if she had the strength and faith to do it when first hearing it, then I'm gonna do it too.
One of the fun things about this year is Wednesday nights youth just continuing to grow. I got a little glimpse into it back in February, but since it's just continued to take off. And so it's fun because Ethan, and back in January, you were just an intern. And now being the youth pastor and running with this for the last year or so has just been so fun to watch. Man, you lead the next generation.
Man, it has been crazy. Wednesday nights are the highlight of my week, obviously, going to see these young people take courage. I think there's a lot of things I could talk about. Rep Your School, Rep Your Grade was incredible. Had 120 students, 15 salvations. So many stories came from that, where we just got to see like really a spike, and not just like obviously the numbers, that's fine, so but really a spike in faith, where you could see kids take this like really personally. They invited their friends. They grabbed hold of this. I think one thing that I really grabbed hold of was that we do once a semester, we do a vision night that we bring all the students after we have like a normal youth night, and we talk about what we want to have happen for the rest of that semester or going into the following semester. And in the spring, we had a sit down, and I remember there was this new girl there. Her name is Tyler Smith, and she's a senior now. And at that time, she was like this really shy, like you kind of had like crack her open. She needed a lot of like pushing. And I've watched Tyler, and this is just like a testament of how our ministry works, of where she was this really quiet girl, and now she is one of the loudest. She serves.
Yeah.
She went to our student leader retreat with us, and she is taking her faith and like just gone so vertical with it. And if you would ask me whenever I met her about a year ago, like, hey, what do you think about Tyler? I'm like, she's great, but she's figuring it out. And that's what all these students are doing, right? They're going through this process of trying to figure out, what is Jesus? Who is he? And I love the way that our church celebrates them and is always pushing them like, hey, go figure this out, go find this. And they do that every single Wednesday night. And it's so important for us to have that. So it's so fun.
Kids are hungry. One of the circles of people I most look forward to walking up to in the lobby on a weekend is our youth students. And it's funny to say, but I feel a little intimidated because I know I'm not cool to them. They're all teenagers, but
you're not.
Seeing high school kids show up for an 8:30 service and they drove themselves and they're excited to be at church is incredible. God is moving in that next generation, and walking into next year, there is so much more that's going to happen. So many more kids that are going to come to know Jesus. So many more Tylers that are going to find faith and own it for themselves.
And this fall was a big season for our church. Lots of growth, and growth, not just in the amount of people coming to church, but in the depth of relationship with God for everybody here. It's almost like we say this every once in a while, but before God is going to do something big through you, he does something big within you. And a lot of the year was a lot of that depth of God doing big things within us, which brought us into the fall and the series Uncommon, which was God doing a big thing through this church. But Uncommon, man, I loved that series. We have an uncommon God who has given us an uncommon calling. And this is an uncommon church with an uncommon vision to make heaven more crowded. And because of that, nothing about anything is ordinary. Right. And so what does it look like to live an uncommon life with Jesus?
Everybody's looking for their life to be a story, to go back to the story you'll tell, a story that's worth watching, a story that's worth reading, a story that's worth attention. And yet it's so easy in a world of common things to just kind of fall into what everybody does in the narratives of the world. And that series was like a splash to remind us all, you're not called to the normal stuff. You're called to something so much greater and so much more challenging in some really beautiful ways. And each week, I think, hit people differently, where there was a variety of topics and things that everyone took away one of those more than any other, as that was the thing I needed because I don't have that in my life, or that's such a place of commonality in my life. And starting to walk with a little holy swagger to go, man, God has called me, he has equipped me, and I'm not living like everybody else. I'm going to live in a different way, and I'm going to embrace that rather than run from that.
You know, it's such a good reminder going into the new year as everybody makes resolutions. All the resolutions are the same. Everybody kind of wants the same things.
Yeah.
The question is, why doesn't everybody actually see those things happen in their lives? We all want these resolutions or these outcomes or these callings, if you will, that are uncommon. But then so many of us just continue to do common things. Yeah. And that might not even be like sinful. It's just common. And God is saying, you want an uncommon calling? You want my uncommon plans? Yeah. Well, then you need to set yourself apart in an uncommon way.
Yeah, I think especially as we move into 21 days of prayer and fasting, I think a big piece of that for the church is going to be, hey, we understand the big sins and we understand that we're supposed to get those out of our lives. But what are the little things that steal your attention throughout the day, whether that be scrolling or Netflix or fill in the blank with 100 different things? What if, as we look forward, the Lord is continuing to call us out of those little things because he has so much more for us? That is an uncommon question. Nobody's asking that question. But if you can learn to ask that question about your life, God's going to continue to do uncommon things.
To tell an uncommon story takes uncommon decisions every single day. And I feel like as we're reflecting on all the series of the year, there were just so many different ways of inviting people into uncommon decisions. Whether that's, I'm going to let the word have the say in my life rather than the world have the say in my life. And I'm going to be in Colossians or whatever it is that I'm reading. I'm going to have an awareness of the spiritual reality of my life. And I'm going to say goodbye to some common practices and things that are actually pulling me further into the darkness. I'm going to be uncommon in clarity of this is who Jesus is. And he's nothing less than that. There's an invitation this year, I think, to clarity and to stepping into that uncommon life that God has for us. Closing the year up with that invitation, of course, into generosity and watching a church that's moving and building and so many things happening. I'm thinking through so many other things, stories we could tell of stories from people that went to classes, people that are in groups, people that are watching God work and sanctify them and being discipled and discipling others. A story of an uncommon church that is walking into a new chapter. And one of the end of year type messages that you gave was about vision. And I think set a new tone for us of expectation and a readiness to walk into the next chapter that God has for us and not kind of limp into the new year. But like you said, we're going to go into prayer and fasting and we're going to go into this year and we're going to grab hold of it and walk into the next thing that God has for us.
Yeah, I held up a Lego box on stage and I said, this is how God gives dreams. And he gives vision, which is the picture on the front of the box. But then dreams or the vision, the picture, like you open the box and what's inside of it is not a finished product, but it's plans and then it's a bunch of pieces. And God says, start building. And vision is everything, right? Without vision, people perish. We have to know what it is that we are building. And it was a little practice of faith for me. God has been doing something in my heart where faith has gone from God can do it to God will do it. And we were joking the very next day after I preached it because you said, kind of took a little risk there yesterday. And we laughed and I was like, yeah, I feel that. I feel, I held up the box and I said, I want to paint a picture 5 years from now. What's on the front of this box? And then I did that and described the vision of multi-locations and a building to replace the one that we're in right now that we don't own. And we gave away $1 million this year. What if next year, what if 5 years from now we were giving away $5 million and we had new locations and new correctional facilities and then saying, I wanted you to hear me say that now so that when it happens, you think, who is this God and what can't he do?
Right.
Because I think that'll build the faith for our church. And I think because he's asking more faith from us as we round this corner and go into the next year, like the Israelites, the faith that got you here is great and it got you here, but it's actually not the faith that's going to get you there. Because where the story goes next is Joshua saying, we're going where we've never been before. We are truly following God into the unknown.
Yeah.
And that's great. You don't have to know it, but you do need faith that God's going with you and that God will do it.
And it takes courage to voice that vision because people are resistant to change and people like the way things are. And then when you start talking about maybe we're going to be split up around the city in some ways and we're going to do things differently in years to come, that's exciting, but it's also scary to people because that means things look different. But I described to you when we were talking about that weekend, I felt like you as the leader were the guy that's farther out in the ocean that's going, I can see land and everyone's back in their boats like, are we sure he can? Like, is it really out there? Like, guys, I can see it. It's there, but you got to come with me and we got to run after it. Like, we got to get there. And that got me really excited for this next chapter, for this next year. You called it the year of miracles. That's coming for us. And I know there's personal miracles in my life, people I'm praying for healing, miracles for this church, a home for this church, so many things we're praying for. And as we wrap, pun intended, wrapped up, looking back on the story we told, I think it's important to shift the posture now. Because we're about to step into New Year's Eve and we're going to count down and there's all those feelings that come with a new year of opportunity and also an opportunity to say goodbye to some things that stay in 2024 that don't need to come with. Like Joshua said, where we're going, that can't come with. And then there's also some things God has done that are coming with. Let me ask you guys in your lives, what are some things you're taking with you? What gets you excited? How do you walk into a new year in a really healthy way?
Faith that the person who is far from God that you've given up on, I'm getting rid of that mindset that says, no, they're so far gone, God's never gonna reach out.
to be able to reach them. Like I imagine the Apostle Paul, before he was converted, there were people praying for him, and they probably imagined like, yeah, but that Saul guy, he's too far gone. And I want to leave that behind in 2024. And I want to challenge anybody, whether it's a son or a daughter or a niece or a neighbor or a coworker, somebody who is far from God, and you're feeling like, yeah, but they're probably too far gone. No, this is the year. I believe, let's start praying that this will be the year that God gets a hold of their life.
Proactive priorities was the thing I got challenged in this year, and now I want to carry into next year to actually live out. I feel like I watched myself in the past year and times be very reactive, and I don't want to live that way, whether that's a reaction towards one of my kids or my wife, a reaction to a circumstance or a decision, but to be proactive and to put priorities in the right places, which is a challenge we all face with relationships and with family in a church, and a whole lot of people that want attention or need a conversation and all these things, and being proactive in those things. And so I know that one of the themes that I'm going to carry into 2025 is meaningful meetings, that I want to set up meaningful meetings. And I could say moments too, but moments feels more spontaneous to me, and meetings feels more intentional to me. And that includes God and starts with God. I want to have meaningful meetings with God where I, like you said, go outside. And I go, God, I'm going there. I'm going to spend some time there, and I want to hear from you. I'm going to meet with you. I want that to be on my calendar. I want that to be something that I'm proactive about, not reacting to life. I want to have meaningful meetings with my wife and with my kids, and not that we're sitting down for a meeting in the way you think of it, but planned times together that are meaningful and have intention put into them. And with people in our church and with friends of mine and people that I can get a proactive place in my life where I'm speaking into their lives or letting them speak into mine. Meaningful meetings with someone who can mentor me and who can speak into my life. I want to take more proactive ownership of the priorities of my life.
Great. I'm just going to steal that and say the same thing. Nope. I'm gonna.
Doug will have the movie Proactive Priorities 2.
Part 2.
The sequel.
Part 2, meaningful meetings.
Meaningful more.
Here's actually a cool metaphor. And I think this will be helpful or maybe useful for anybody tuning in right now who is still with us at the end of this thing. Congratulations. When Ormeo makes a recap video, for instance, whether it's like, let's say it's baptism weekend, you'll make a recap video where you go through all the footage and then you decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to cut. That right now, in an act of looking back in remembrance on your year, we just did that as a church and want to invite you to do that for your life and maybe for your family, where you can look back and you actually are the editor and you can make a decision. What do you want to keep in this recap video? If 2024 was a recap video, what did you learn? What were the beautiful moments? What were the meaningful meetings that you had? What do you want to keep? And then what do you want to cut and let's just leave it in the past. Just let that die. Just leave that in 2024. Leave that in the wilderness because you're crossing through the Jordan River into a new season, into a new chapter, into the promised land. And you have agency to actually make a moment right now where you, as the editor of 2024, turn around and go, I don't need to take that with me. That belief system or that idea, that false idea that I've been believing is not serving me anymore. And it doesn't get to come with me. And I can leave that in the wilderness and move through the Jordan River and take what I want with me for the next season. So just an invitation. I know I'm going to do that personally. And I want to invite everybody from our church to do that personally as well.
A new year represents what is true every single day. Scripture says God's mercies are new every day. That there is always a fresh start, there's always a new beginning, but there's something that shifts in the new year where you believe that a little bit more.
Yes.
And so my hope is, as we're wrapping this up, that this doesn't just go by as that was a cool hour where we reflected on the church and it was a great year at church, but that there's a stirring that this creates in each of us to look back with gratitude. And man, if you are part of this church family, whether you're part of our online family, you give to this church, you serve at this church, you lead a group at this church, you're engaged, involved in any single way, you come here on the weekends, thank you. Thank you for making these stories possible. Thank you for being a part of the story that God is telling through this church. I hope that we celebrate and we have gratitude for that. And then I hope that it feels like now we're unwrapping a new year. We're unwrapping something new that God's going to do in our lives, and we're stirred up and ready and excited for what he's going to do. And so invite somebody to the first weekend of church this year.
Yes.
It might be the best chance you have of that person actually showing up. We are in the resolution week, the resolution moment where everyone says, you know what? I'm going to explore my faith this year. I'm going to go to church this year. this could be that open door that changes somebody's life. And at the end of next year, they have a story to tell because of our invitation, because of our faith, our belief that God's going to do something new in their life. And get ready for what God's going to do in your life, because we are ready for a new chapter. We're ready for the year of miracles. And we're so excited that we have a family to run into that with. So guys, we love you. Thank you for being a part of this with us and wrapping up 2024. It's been an incredible year. And as we always say at Red Rocks, we are just getting started.